written in so many different and beautiful ways that grief is the language of love.
Yeah.
That grief is the language of love. And so, we thought we'd start off with a softball of a question.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, seriously. Yeah. Because this is
talk a little bit about what that means.
Because it's our language now. I mean, it's our 3rd year pandemic anniversary ish right now. And I think we are learning to count our losses, especially since our culture says that nothing is lost. There's just this invisible math where everything's all supposed to count up. And every now and then we get a lovely term that helps us name our grief. Like some of us really latched onto the term ambiguous loss, like the sense that there's not a defined, it's not a death. Sometimes many of us have experienced, one of the many pandemic deaths and then still felt alienated from that loss with COVID Zoom funerals. And then there's just so many kinds of losses that we haven't really been able to add up yet, like all the trips and connections postponed, all the friendships that shrunk and we didn't really mean for them to, and ways in which we could have been different, but we're not. And I think I guess I feel grateful to have a moment like this to talk about grief as love, because grief normally just made me feel a tremendous amount of shame that I hadn't adequately solved the problem that is my life. And my life wasn't much of a problem until a few years ago, and then it was a huge problem. But it's about I was 35 and I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I think my primary feeling was embarrassment to have lost so much and then to be causing everyone else to lose so much. Yeah. So I feel anytime we can think of it as an expression of our loves, our things we cannot live without, even an extension of our fear when we're told, especially in church, that we're not allowed to be afraid. That's why I thought that was such a perfect song that Paul chose, that it's not do not be afraid, but let our love be outweighed, outweigh our fears was such a powerful message in a season of loss.
Yeah. And that we are built in such a way where fear is not only normal, but is a normal immediate response. Like I love that every time an angel appears, the first thing they say is "Fear not." Like God knows that that's going to be the first thing that we go to.
Exactly. This must be super terrifying for you. It's exactly like theologically a reasonable response.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I love that idea that to name our grief as love erases that shame and reminds us how we are built for love, and there is a part of us that is going to ache because of that.
Yeah, I guess maybe it was the first time someone, I forget how he said it, but the feeling I had was, because I was trying to figure out what it would mean for me to die so early, and the like hunger it created. And I felt immediately like I must be very unfaithful to not feel like lives can, that it was enough, or that I wasn't furious or wanted more. And that feeling that loss gives us, which is an end without an ending. And I don't know, I think sometimes the neatness of the stories of faith we're told make us feel like we're always supposed to feel an ending because cosmically we're living inside of a story in which God gives us an ending, but we don't always get to feel that. We just get to feel our regular garbage days.
And there have been so many of them.
There's really a pretty significant number of them at this point.
Yes. I mean, I think that's one of the things that you have such a gift for, is like creating these helpful reminders for us that when life just totally falls apart for people we know and love, or for ourselves, or when our loved ones, their lives fall apart, and we have these sort of bless our heart kind of impulse to offer some less than helpful words to each other as a way of somehow softening what cannot actually be softened. Or that tendency to verbally make ourselves feel better when we're in the presence of deep grief and pain. And and you give advice on how we should not give advice. And it is the best advice on some things to say instead. So like in the wake of all of these garbage days, in the wake of the terrible tragedies that are happening around us and to our bodies and to our cells, how in the world do we truly live with the constant recognition of our mortality all around us?
Yeah, I don't really think that our mortality is really something that's usually given to us as a reasonable category. I think we're normally just given solutions to it. Like a bucket list phenomenon is a very common solution to the problem of being a person. Like you should just collect a defining set of experiences and put them on social media. Then you will have done it. Or I was at a conference this last week and they were talking about included stuff on like genetic optimization, and the health optimization assumption for this group of bajillionaires was that that a certain kind of person could just keep living and living and living and living, as if 120 would be the new 80. And it honestly reminded me of the prosperity preachers that I used to study, in which it would feel embarrassing to die, especially because, if disease is a result of unfaithfulness, then I went to a televangelist funeral one time and they had a big explanation in the bulletin about how it was okay that he died because he surrendered his spirit. As if everyone's just like going around giving up the ghost when they feel like it, as opposed to clawing at it with our bare hands. So all I have to say is, sorry, Katie, that was a very long preamble to.
No, clawing at it with our bare hands, how we live sometimes, right?
This is mine and you will not. I think the default assumption with our Dr. Oz culture is younger you, better you. Aging is embarrassing. Mortality is an indictment. That even there's a lovely, gosh, God bless the English. They have a lovely phrase for old age. They call it dotage, right? Like what a nice, like, and then like infancy and dotage, as if like we're not allowed to have these bookends, ideal bookends to where our dependence is assumed. And I think part of what I hear us struggling with in those, because I study self-help, and so all the cheap paperback books, what I hear is like that the volume on our immortality is turned up very loud. Yeah. So I think even just spiritually, as Christians, we have a lot to say about being about death not being final, but still being built into the bodies we have and the lives we have. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think maybe just like step one, at least in my mind, is accepting that our fading into dependence in so many seasons of our life is absolutely normal, and part two of I think it's probably also just got to do with the story like of sanctification, right? Sanctification probably doesn't happen when we're on our best days. Things are amazing and unlikely to change us very much.
Yeah. That idea that our lives get written into our wrinkles if we're lucky is not part of the prosperity gospel that we ingest in our culture.
Yeah. There's like a whole version too on Instagram, or like where they try to take that like very precious truth that you just said, and then they make it into a series of like supermodels with very small stretch marks, and then they've got millions of followers. And I just think we've got a more radical vision of of like not just tolerable failings, but like culturally unlovable things about us that come apart. Because otherwise we're just baptizing a slightly more, like a slightly different story of our self-compassion, self-help culture. I remember when I was little, my very first, I started a best friends writing club. Where I was hoping to give my unbelievable chapter books where you had to like peel off the perforated sides. I remember mostly just a girl named Michelle. And I was like, you need to read this. It was my first novel. And it was just this absolutely gorgeous elfin creature who had an unshakable bond with her horse, Artemis. And my sister was like, you need to give her a flaw. And so I was like, I'll give her one thin scar down her, down her slender forearm. And I honestly think when I look at our culture's versions of like flaws, we have these mommy books that say it's okay if you yelled at your kid in a bank one time, but like not that you had sort of bipolar, or that we can have small manageable sins, but not any of the really interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said at the beginning, grace that we can't out sin, I thought that was such a gorgeous reversal of the way we normally think of it, like such an abundance of love that even our absurdly large failings would somehow be be deeply lovable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was gorgeous theology.
The idea that like sometimes even if you have to cry daily in your pantry near the Cheerios,
Yes.
like God is there too.
Yeah. Yes.
So how do you make a meaningful life when you're in the pantry Cheerio moment?
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to make meaning when it feels like life is falling apart? If it's not bucket lists.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just survival.
Mm-hmm.
What's the way to live in the in-between when you're not thriving and you don't want to just survive?
Yes. It's such a great way to put it too. Because our culture gives us this perfectibility, invincibility narrative, but we don't want the version where it's simply survival or despair. And I think our most useful language, I think, is of limited agency. It's of not everything is possible or nothing is possible, but what is possible today. And I have found that to be not like a sort of neo-Buddhist live in the moment. All you have is now. A lot of whispering, all we have is now. I think so much of what God asks us to do in a day is to try to have sort of like lungs expanding and contracting, more agility, more movement around like seeing the possibility, sometimes of ministry, sometimes of naps inside of a moment where we learn. I mean, I hear pastors say this all the time, right? I remember that most of their job happens in the interruptions. Like when they have, and what I hear in that is the agility is to check their resources and be able to see where their own gifts can meet the calling of the moment. And sometimes that means we have to be able to have a bigger, like for all the human bulldozers out there, or the like deep martyrs, or that we have to have then an account, not just of our possibility, but of our limitations. Sometimes the answer is you are flooded. You are in over your head. You need to shut it down. You need to let other people love you. You need to be carried. You need to have an account of dependence that doesn't make you feel embarrassed. Yeah, that's the spiritual side of the equation I'm not wonderful at, but I do think marks a maturity I would like to grow into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the recording of this, I think that we would all benefit, myself included, from just replaying that 10 seconds every day. Just check for balance on this side and then check it on that side and see what is possible today. What is possible and what is mine to do? And that's rest and to let people love us. Why is that so hard?
I don't know. Katie, tell me more about Presbyterians, because in my, I've got Canadian Mennonite stuff in there, and we are just, the cheese eaters of the prairies. We pride ourselves on humility is what I was about to say, unironically. But there's a feeling that there's an accidental bootstrapsness of not wanting to, being quick to help, but a little embarrassed about needing help. Is that, let's say someone was sick in your congregation, or worse, they did something and their life fall apart. So they felt like it was a little bit their fault. Is there an easy culture of care, or are you guys natural hiders, if you don't mind me asking?
I that we are all so very human in that regard. And I think that jumping to help each other is a natural, beautiful extension of Christian faith expressed. And I think it is harder for a lot of us, myself included, to receive grace. I think that call that we hear from Jesus to love our neighbors as ourselves, that a lot of times I think it's easier for us to say, I will love my neighbors well. And then the like ourselves part is like, oh wait, that was part of that commandment too.
Yes.
How do we do that part well so we can love our neighbors well? The receiving grace is in our culture, and Presbyterians are not exempt from that. We are thankfully Mennonites.
I do, it's funny, like theologically, I think we're all in this ability to lean into either agency or passivity. Like the more contemplative traditions are better at a more spiritual passivity. And then if you're like Pentecostal or just accidentally upper middle class, then sometimes you fall into the like, and I will give in a particular way. But I do find it's been tricky. I mean, I was the recipient of so much care for so long that not having a crisis, but life as a chronic condition made it more difficult for me to accept like the consistent love of others. I was like, no, I'm fine now. Thanks. It's been 6 months. Now I'll start owing you. Let's wrap this up.
Yep. And to drop the mental list of who brought you which meal, and how to give back. And one of the most amazing gifts that one of the saints on this call dropped at my door once after I was recovering from surgery, had their own thank you note included, so that when it was his and it was comical, and it made me laugh, and it had a stamp on it so I could just put it in the mail and send them their own thank you note. And what a brilliant gift.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
What a clever, oh my gosh. And if that person is you, participant list, you put that in the chat thing so we can congratulate you. And I'm so curious where they got that, if they just came up with that.
It's brilliant, and it is joy to be shared, because it is hard to not mentally keep track of grace that we receive.
Yes.
It is not unlimited, but it's unlimited.
Yes. Like it moves grace back into the formula of things owed. That's so true. I remember I used to sit up in the hospital on like a chemo day really, really late, and then just make lists. And it was lists of people I was trying to check. I felt like they had done something for me and it was kind, and I felt like I owed them an update, or I owed them a thank you, or I just felt so, like over my head with things I knew that I could never adequately repay. And that feeling was, that was hard. That was hard for this Enneagram too.
I can imagine. The shoulds get us every time.
Yes. It's very wise. Yes. You should write many books like this. I'm liking all of this. This is wonderful.
So my partner is a religious studies scholar, and he would be very sad if I went home tonight having not asked you, in your research and with your field of expertise around prosperity gospel, what are you seeing communities of faith do with the economic issues and the pandemic at large? How are folks explaining that in your ongoing research?
And if anybody, for instance, is not nearly as obsessed with the prosperity gospel, I will joyfully explain it. My expertise is around televangelists and people you might see on 24-hour Christian television programming, and people who believe that God will reward them with health and wealth and happiness if they have the right kind of faith. And moments like this of distended grief, of distended loss, of especially because one of the primary proofs of the prosperity gospel is economic lift. It's like the money in your pocket, but it's also the health of your body. And it represents millions of people in the United States. And so it's not entirely reducible to say people with high vaccine skepticism, but there was a significant part of that community that was. And so there were a couple high profile deaths of leaders who refused to be vaccinated and then died badly. And so part of it is the show and tell of health that creates that, and of, the economic downturn that people have faced. And so in all of this, I think the bottom line is show and tells. When we make ourselves show and tells, we make each person proof of God's good, better, best. It makes a very intense litmus tests for movements like the prosperity gospel, but they tend to have a very strong, there was some strong, calcification of their positions that are sometimes anti big health. And so they, it might lead to like vaccine skepticism, but for the most part, it mostly just leads to a more entrenched individualism, where there is a solution to the problem of the pandemic. There is a solution to the problem of everybody being sicker and poorer. And that's smile and the boss will notice you. Be the kind of person that capitalism rewards. God loves it. And then God loves a cheerful giver. Give and it will be given back to you. And so the fact that it's been so hyper individualistic is always the kind of easy silver lining. That's why the prosperity gospels of the 20s and 30s did as well in the boom time as it did during the economic depression. Is God will reward you if you have a certain kind of faith is always a free solution that you can sell. I don't mean that in a sort of dismissive way, but that we long for hyper agency, especially when we feel terrified. And so it's easy then to give someone something they can do, as opposed to what we all had to do, which was to be dependent on things like the development of a vaccine that we didn't want, that was entirely out of our control, except those of us who run labs. Then thank you that it was in your control, and we're really happy for that.
And this is why everyone with the capacity became walkers during the pandemic.
Oh my gosh, seriously. So much aggressive. So much just like sad. It wasn't even strolling, just like sad, but determined walking.
Yep. Like just sauntering.
Right.
No purpose.
Every neighborhood property was newly evaluated with our eyes. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. So good enough has resonated really deeply with so many in our church community. And as Immanuel put it, that quote, we are filled with type A overachievers. One person submitted this question based on that noticing, which says, for some of us, as much as we agree with the goals, traveling the path to accepting good enough is challenging.
Yeah.
Have you or your readers given you ideas for going down this path, or indeed starting on the path, and they note beyond read the book a second time?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because it's because we're choosing to accept things that we know we worry make us less lovable, right? We're not, and are inherently countercultural. I mean, just even the premise of being good enough instead of being best life now, that wonderful and horrifying catchphrase that summarizes the promises inherent in our, and in everything, like from, I heard a 5-minute sermon on it from my Peloton running app today about how I just need to accept my excellence. And
how's that working?
I'm not built for that kind of excellence. I think allowing I think it's hard because it feels like a kind of unfaithfulness to not always be living into the fullness of every moment. But the problem is it's confusing maximization with sanctification, right? We already have language for this. Like, we do believe God can make us more holy, but it will not always look the same as being excellent or being a multitasker or being an optimizer in the way that our culture loves. And so accepting that God still can make us good and holy and our lives beautiful, but it's not going to always be recognizable for me feels like the first step, because then I start to notice things that are good that are not culturally acceptable, like wild inefficiency. Loving people is just so inefficient. It's a terrible idea, guys. If you want to be super capitalist, like, don't love your neighbor. Like, don't help a stranger. It's it's not scalable, not that kind of attitude. But we are the people who kind of theologically believe that it's okay to throw that one starfish back in the ocean, even though there are hundreds of thousands more, but that it is good. And the other thing that's also dumb, I feel like this could just also fall under a talk called things that are dumb. Things that are dumb. Love. Things that are dumb. Things are dumb. Joy. I mean, and it's different from a happiness maximizing, master your morning thing is joy is not formulaic. Joy usually, it comes from people's dumb delights, from the stubbornness of pansies, that should wither at every frost. And how funny my kid thinks Monty Python and the Holy Grail is, which I just left him watching to come here with you guys. And just the sicker I got, the more I started visiting like world's largest statues. And
second I heard that, I thought, this woman knows things. She is a font of wisdom.
Do you have any nearby? I'll come right over.
I will make one if it would make you come right over.
I accept the terms of this. Oh my God. And none of it is, it's just that there is something about either slowing down or noticing something beautiful that affirms our goodness. It's like my team and I, because we get to hear so many beautiful stories like you do in the church, and we always feel like it kind of like flicks the chord where you feel transcendence ringing through things. We're like, oh, flicking the chord. I can feel it in my body. But so a part of a lovely way to start separating ourselves from our culture's view of these capitalistic virtues is to notice when we feel ourselves ringing with God's truth and love and our own createdness, and then it is somehow not excellent, but it is good. And then we know we're onto something, I think.
And you felt that more so as you felt yourself facing your mortality. You were able to start seeing more of those holy, beautiful dandelions in the sidewalk.
Yeah. I think that might be, though, that the Holy Spirit loves the suffering, loves the weak. I think God's special mercies toward the weak and the times, the worst moments of our life is, hey, I don't mean to be recently when I talked to the Archbishop of Canterbury,
like you do.
He's on a Tuesday. He had a really interesting point that I never want to forget. He said, he suffered the loss of his daughter when she was very young. And then a year later, his other child had a traumatic injury. And he said, with the loss of his daughter, he felt that same feeling that I felt when I was very sick of the sweetness of God's love. But then a year later, in a similarly traumatic thing, he said he felt nothing,
Mm.
but felt carried by the love of community. He
Mm.
said, if you're very lucky, you get both, but
Yeah.
either way, you should have one or the other. And I thought that was kind of an excellent account of why the church is, why our ability to open ourselves up to transcendence is part of the way we can respond to the tragedy of the world, but
Mhm.
also just the incredible work you all do in loving each other, that there are days where we'll be able to feel it and notice, and the rest of the time we'll just have to be carried.
Yeah. And some of that involves letting ourselves be carried and not becoming that dead weight. You know how you can make yourself heavier by just we have to let ourselves be carried. That's hard to do.
I wish I had a pen right now. I want so much to write down that image. You're right. It is so much worse. If you ever try to catch someone when they're actually fainting, so much harder.
Yep. And the spirit is catching us all the time. That is a hard-working wind. Are there like other insights or ideas that sort of feel like aha moments to you when you think about how to live an okay-ish life with incurable optimism?
Yeah.
Like optimism for some people comes really naturally, I think. Yeah. And for others, like it requires practice. So like, how do you practice incurable optimism in the face of garbage days?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So we set aside it as being a performance of happiness. We take ourselves for sure off the hook for especially the gendered work of being pleasing to others at all times. So we try to set aside what it is not. And then then we think about what makes us that kind of deeply hopeful, incurably optimistic person. Mm-hmm. And I think there's lots of kinds of people, right, in this version, and maybe it's their temperament. One is the natural Tiggers, right? The bounce, bounce, bounce. Yes, and they're wonderful. They're just, no whack-a-mole can get them down. They will bounce on. Others of us are moodier, more likely to feel like we fall and we hit every branch. Mm-hmm. For that person, being deeply hopeful is sometimes structured by good routines, is by the sitting down and the journaling, or the habits that help them notice and feel back in the world again. Because I don't think my dad would mind me saying it, but he is, so he has depression, and it's always been a really significant obstacle. And one of the cutest things in the whole world is listening to him wake up in the morning, because the room is completely dark and we have a very small house. Growing up, we had a very small house, so I could always hear it. And I could tell that he was awake, and there was always a silence. And then you could hear his voice go, "Go, Jerry, go, Jerry, go, Jerry, go." He's just like willing himself into the day. I do think that for some of us, launching into the day requires that we are like, you just take that first step kind of talk.
And you give yourself a theme song.
I think "Go, Jerry, Go" is the cutest thing I've ever heard. But and for a lot of people, they structure a good enough day based on the schedule they make, where they keep obligations to others. Like, that makes me think of my lovely cello teacher, Adeline. Adeline just always showed up, and her ministry of just showing up when she was supposed to. She didn't have to have a great personality. She didn't have to smile. She just always, that was her being incurably optimistic about there being enough. Is she showed up when she said she should. And I find those to be like different accounts of optimism that are actually look like faithfulness and hope and courage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, putting one foot in front of the other when it feels like that is impossible. Yeah.
And it doesn't just have to be an expression of a feeling. It can be a willful set of movements into an ultimate act, which is presence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. real presents are nice too. I really also just like when people send presents.
Especially if they were the world's largest.
Yes, exactly. If you could scale it, I'd really love that. Yeah.
So what is hope? Like how in the world would you define hopefulness?
Yeah.
Try to cling onto or claw onto.
Yeah. Well, because I've been confused for most of it. I thought hope should just be an expression of certainty, right? That God has done things for us and on our behalf. And that I, as a Christian, my active hopefulness is that I'm supposed to be certain on my behalf and God's. And now it doesn't feel very much like certainty at all. I think because I know, and this has been the world of cancer, is that because I can't know my future or, and neither can anyone else. Hope to me is the story that God tells about us, that we are made in love and for love, and that someday God will save the world.
Yeah.
And until then, I have to act not believing that my ends are the same thing, that my disappointments and the way my world comes apart is going to end the story that God is telling about us. So ultimately, I think being hopeful is a kind of enoughness that God will give back to us. But in the meantime, that I am allowed to be hungry, and I'm allowed to be mad, and I'm allowed to be like blown away by the beauty of what already is.
Yeah. Awe and anger can exist in the same moment.
I don't think we should be all that thrilled about finitude. I mean, I think there's some kind of design. Every now and then I'm like, God, I feel like there's some kind of design flaw. Like maybe we could have done this different. Maybe we should have done this differently, but apparently that's not up to me.
Yeah. But somehow it is enough that the grace will continue, and that story of love isn't finished being written.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I feel like enough is the best. It's the most hopeful thing I can say, as opposed to everything is complete, everything's done, everything's checked off. Like, what if I just had enough? And that's why I love all those sort of the wisdom of the Alcoholics Anonymous community and all those in recovery and with addiction, is they talk about enoughness a lot. And I think they're wise.
And about getting rid of the illusions of our independence, that we are dependent on God and each other, and that is true for survival.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're like, and then I will make it through this. Yes.
Because of you.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on being honest about disappointment, right? In I think it was chapter 22 or 23 of this particular devotional book. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that feeling that God isn't listening to your prayers sometimes, or seeing miraculous recoveries around you and not within your family, or that sense of our bodies betraying us, that I think so many of us experience at some point or other, either to ourselves or for our loved ones. What is it like? What do we do with that when we feel like God isn't hearing our prayers? What do you do?
I feel like that's I thought about that maybe for a whole year. I felt so consumed by that thought and that heartbreak. Sometimes it felt like anger, but mostly it felt like that God was just breaking my heart. Really, you don't you could do a miracle, but you're not going to do it for me. The could but isn't feels like could but won't. And all the, the theological solutions to that felt very alienating, that, which cuts both ways. As you know, there's the either I've done something wrong, I'm not sufficiently faithful, if I would only just, insert a million tasks, I could save myself, pray a certain way, be a certain person, have uncovered something about who I am and what I've done wrong. or that a certain kind of story about God solves that problem, that God is so sovereign and beyond my knowing that my failure to accept that is again a story about my unfaithfulness. And then if I just understood the inscrutability of God, which is of course a very funny sentence, but that it would be satisfying in some way. And that's the subject of my very first sort of more personal book, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, was just kind of that feeling was, God, there is so much certainty out there apparently about why things happen, that everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I miss the feeling, like I miss the feeling that the world is explainable, but I now know it to be a tragedy, that little kids die and terrible people live, and and that wars sweep over everybody, and that there's an earth plague, like just things that feel dumb to say out loud, but that great evil haunts our world and it seems absolutely unsolvable. So in all that, how do we live like that, knowing that about God, that the world is broken, and still being able to say lovely things about I think the feeling I had was like, do you not love me though? Like, do you not love us enough to just like reach out just a little?
Yeah.
Sistine Chapel, just like reach out a little further and take my hand.
Yeah.
And letting ourselves be heartbroken because we're not, because we're just, because we're not in love when we're doing that. We're just desperate and wanting to feel our own goodness again. So I think like not allowing solutions to interrupt that heartbreak, because I have not found wouldn't it be amazing if I were the first person, like this was the call in which I revealed to you the solution to the problem of evil, and like this, I hadn't written it down and this is how you discovered it. Like, I'm the first person.
That 42 came to you and suddenly
it's so weird. It's weird. It's weird how I withheld it until now. But like the unsolvability of suffering, and yet God's persistent witness that God made us for a purpose, and that purpose was love. And so like living in that has been to me, I guess that gets down to like it's just a kind of grief, but that grief is in that way also the language of love.
It is. Yeah. That searching for what wholeness feels like, and what that is to pray for wholeness when a cure is not always possible.
Yeah.
And I so often, when reading the healing stories in scripture, just think about the people in the surrounding towns who weren't healed.
Yeah, that's right.
Why couldn't you just like blanketly heal everyone all at once? Like that's right. Those are some of the questions that I have for God, right? But that translates into the particularity of our own lives in the beautiful way that you speak to so helpfully and vulnerably.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have one thing that blew me away that someone said recently that we were talking about the problem of evil and I believe in miracles, and, I've studied miracle rallies for about 15 years. So I've been around miracles. But then of course they didn't happen to me. It was terrible. And I was talking to Jerry Sitzer, who has that gorgeous book on grief, and he'd lost, his wife and 2 kids in a tragic car accident. And, but he said, well, but there isn't like a solution to these problems. And I was listening and I was like really with them, but then I was kind of like, yeah, but Jerry, like in my case, like, I think there would be a solution. God could just heal me and then I wouldn't have to have cancer anymore. And that feels actually pretty solvable from a cosmic perspective. And,
Yep.
And then Jerry said, oh, but Kate, here's the dirty little secret about miracles, is they never last.
Mm.
And like the thought, of course, the like, and then Lazarus raised from the dead also dies again, is that like each of these moments get to feel like that kind of sweetness we were talking about transcendence, and the feeling when we finally get to have truths about God correspond with our feelings. Amazing. Can't get enough. But that ultimately, it doesn't solve the problem of our finitude. And I have honestly been thinking about that ever since he said it. Yeah, is that like that these are fireflies, that these are things that burn brightly and they're beautiful, but they fade, but we still have to grapple with our mortality.
Yeah, that is such a blessing to hear that reminder that even miracles are finite.
Yeah, I know. They should be permanent.
All at the same time.
Why didn't I not think of that comment, Jerry? It was great. There's a lot of Jerrys on this call.
Oh, we are all so mortal. I love that reminder that Lazarus dies again. Yeah. I don't love that, but I love the reminder.
I love the truth of it. I'm not enjoying the reality of it. Yeah.
You have such a gift for writing blessings, and hearing that moment where you talked about hearing someone say something that somehow connects to the feeling at that moment. Are there other spoken or like enacted blessings that people have given you? Because you have created this way of blessing other people. And so what are some of the blessings like that that you have felt and been able to hear or internalize?
I love it when people's like it feels like they're giving you hope. They're giving you a thing you can't see for yourself. I had this bishop friend, and everybody needs a bishop friend. Feels reasonable, but I work at a divinity school. But my friend Will, he just is the person who always shows up at my surgeries. And I remember it was like 4 a.m. and he's got his hand on my head, and I was so scared going into this surgery. And then he was praying, and he said, and bless the surgeons and the work of their hands. But if you don't mind, God, and he was like, bless this one. He goes, because her best work is yet to come. like hoping for my future when I was scared of dying in a surgery. I was like, one, bold move, Bishop.
Living in hope.
And it's like risked feeling embarrassed. But it feels to me so beautiful when we hope things for ourselves, that like for others that we would never dare to hope for ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that is a gorgeous, gorgeous thing.
Yeah. Things that we would never dare to hope for ourselves. That takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah. I won't bother hoping for it, but if you could hope for it, I think I might believe it. Yeah.
So like maybe that's part of the gift of needing community like that, is that we can hold that hope for each other when there are those moments when it may actually be impossible to hold it for ourselves.
Yeah. Because you feel it, right? When they look at you with their just moon faces of love, even if you don't know them that well, and you're like, oh, you're giving me something. I can feel it.
Yep. One of my favorite pre-surgical meditations is by Bella Ruth Naverstek, and she has you visualize as you're going into the OR, a room full of all of the people or pets, or basically all the people making those faces, and they surround you as you enter the OR, and you just get to look at them as you're counting backwards. And it is that moment of hope, like they are holding the hope for you when you can't hold it for yourself.
That's so beautiful.
So what are some of the ways that that you feel like the folks that you have interviewed, you who are pals with bishops and
sorry for doing a lot of bishop name dropping a thing, and you've gotten a lot of it this evening.
But what are some of the gems from like the amazing writers and speakers and psychologists and everybody that you've gotten to talk with, when you think about folks living in the Beltway in particular, who are so close to national politics? Are there pieces of your work that kind of come to the surface for blessings that this particular community might need?
I'm trying to think. I'm actually, because please know, this is a admonition of complete honesty. I am very bad at interviewing politicians. I'm really good at interviewing sad people. But if someone is like a very slick public exterior, I'm like, sounds true, bye. And then I just creep out because I can't, because their lives are fine at that time. But I did a lovely, I wasn't lovely, he was lovely. I did a lovely interview with the Surgeon General, the one that we have right now, Vivek Murthy. And his specialty is about loneliness. And so that one of the costs of frankly, the fragility of our democracy and the attenuation of relationships in the pandemic is that fewer and fewer people can identify more than one person that they would call if they were under duress. And so as part of his tour of for his first go around last time he was Surgeon General, he did this wide set of interviews. And so he just said his best advice was like, find your three, and it's going to be very embarrassing, but think about the three names of the people that you wouldn't mind asking something for. And if you don't have that should be a really, then start with lunch. but having your three people that you could call leads to, better long-term health, lower rates of anxiety. But that was kind of a nice, because there's so much mistrust and fear right now, that another way of framing it that's gentler and more bridge building is around loneliness. And that, I did an interview too, I think it was last week, with Anna Sale. She has a podcast about talking about hard things. And one of the chunks of that interview was about the fact that part of the reason why we're so lonely is we're surrounded by people, frankly, we don't agree with and whose views are painful to us. So then how then can we build across our differences to be able to have the kind of love that still lets someone be an emergency contact, even if they voted for someone that is very painful for you. So I think we're going to need all of this going forward. Is like, these are tender, fragile, very loud times. And how do can we build small intimacies that can support a life?
Yeah. Tender, fragile, and loud times. Wow, that is true.
Well, I'm friends with, I only have two subsets of friends, and it's pastors and journalists, and they're both saying the same thing, which is, this is a very fragile time for relationships.
It really is, that everything feels more tender right now. Yeah. And that everything feels bigger, easier. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And boy, those angry Psalms, this is a time for those.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. But our algorithms are going to work against human relationship. They are. Our algorithms will make it very difficult for us to feel connected and feel neighborly and feel loved and understood. So we're going to, the work of the church will be inherently against the grain, against our algorithms.
Yeah. So that leads me to the question that I think is it might sound a little more practice-based, but what role does your faith play in your living your own life right now? Like, how are you tending to your faith here and now? What feels doable? What feels workable?
Yeah. Right. Weirdly, I think the best kind of spiritual practices I have around just living a good enough life I got from being sick was because I only had these 2 to 3 month scan intervals. So I really only knew if I'd be okay for another 60 or 90 days per. And that was, of course, an awful way to live. And also, sometimes I find like hemming in your future a little bit, just like not imagining the endless and just imagining what a good spring feels like a good enough spring without, I know we all have to make plans. God does not do our taxes. I get that. But like, just And then, because then I find delights feel a little bit more possible. Like, oh, look, there's that we can write little notes in our calendar for ourselves that like, because we won't do it if it's the next day, but maybe just the feeling of walking around a garden or an art museum, or promising ourselves we actually will reach out to that friend that we did used to have good conversations with. Or I find that small plans that open up my life, knowing that our lives naturally constrict, and that we will be full of fresh wonder if we do that. And so I find the calendar to be actually like a good spiritual act of forcing me to reach out, especially to a lonely person, reconnecting with wonder, and making one really dumb, fun plan.
Oh, you just planned my week for me. How much better would the world be if we did those 3 things every week?
That's right.
So what is your dumb fun thing going to be this week?
Oh, I rented this absolutely one of those boats where you're mad at teenagers when they're on them together. One of those is like
Like
pontoon.
A pontoon boat?
Yes, like a pontoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I rented a pontoon, and I don't know what I'm going to do on it, but I will make a plan. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That is fantastic. I'm sure there's like 200 songs just like I'm on a boat. So I'm gonna know all of them. Sometimes I was
you're gonna make your on a boat playlist.
I was on a plane the other day and a little kid was dressed up as a pilot, and I was like, you get it. Mm-hmm. Like, so then the best version of that one, and sometimes I just order these things on the internet, is I should probably order a captain's hat and just live it. Thank you. Little Big Town actually has a song Pontoon. Thank you, Kate. Yes, I think being like, I have these little kids in my life that I love. And so, but I mean, for them, they're easy. I order pizza and then I pick a movie and then I order costumes about the movie and then we wear them and then we make up a dance, and we could do that anytime. So
that is a beautiful blessing for all of the parents on this call, because parenting in a pandemic is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I find just $20 on Amazon and a movie and a pizza is the best part of that's. They'll talk about that for a year.
Well, on May 15th, Kate Bowler, I feel you will be very excited to know that we have now booked 2 ponies, one of which will be wearing a unicorn horn for no reason. You're welcome to come to church and ride a unicorn horn.
That is the best. That is the best idea.
Sometimes you just need some wonder.
Oh my gosh. That's a great hope. Thank you.
So as we close our time together, you've been so generous with your time and with our conversation together. And I would love to ask if I could offer you a blessing. You in particular, you who bless so many of us with your blessings. And then I wonder if after that blessing, if you might be willing to give us a benediction for the night.
Oh, I would love that. That sounds beautiful.
Well, let us pray together then. Blessed are you who find words to speak when so much feels unspeakable. Blessed are you, Kate, who remind us, even as you remind yourself, that none of us are really alone, ever, even when it feels that way. Blessed are you who hold grief with tenderness, who hold space for pain without trying to discount it or even take it away. You who show up with us at the tombs of our lives to simply say, I see you, tell me more. And blessed are you who remind us to stop and enjoy the silly, holy laughter that somehow interrupts our lives, even through our tears, jarring us into remembering that God is with us here too, and that joy can coexist with our sorrow. And somehow it is good enough. Blessed are you, Kate Bowler, and together to God, we give thanks for your light.
Oh, that's so lovely. Oh, that's so beautiful. You guys, now this is my church. I love it. Thank you. I'll be right there. Oh my gosh.
We'll waiting.
All right. Let me see if I can benedict us. Do you always notice that pastors always have like great benediction hands? So that's the difference between they're always like right up there. They just like naturally creep up. That's how you know in a strong W. All right, my loves. Do you want, all right. We'll do a blessed are we. Okay, guys. Blessed are we, beloved, who gather up the truths we need to live here. Beauty, love, joy, acceptance, community, and more than a touch of courage. We who are learning to live in the discomfort of what is and what might never be. Blessed are we, letting ourselves be stilled and quieted in that love, to take on only what we are given to do, and sighing, we ask ourselves to get up again and take the next right tiny step, walking together where God promises to meet us once again. Bless you, my dears. Thanks for having me. What a gorgeous group. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want you to know that when I leave this call, I'm immediately writing down 5 things that you said for my own personal edification. So thank you.
And I also must tell you, in one of your podcast episodes, there was a moment when you were interviewing Matthew McConaughey, when you said something to the effect of, I guess I'm the kind of person now who interviews Matthew McConaughey. Kate Bowler, you are my Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, that's so nice. Green lights, Katie.
Thank you so much for the gift of this time and the gift that your life is for all of us who get to be on the receiving end of blessings like this.
Oh, thanks. All right, I'll see you guys again soon, I can tell. Awesome. All right, lovely. Okay. Take care, guys.
Peace be with you.